Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets season comes to an end. What did we learn across this tumultuous 2024-2025 calendar year? And how about a little bit of stat tracking and play-in basketball? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms and welcome you in to, you know it, BTH. Yeah, that's right. Backwards Hat Day. Although I don't think those are the right initials. We blow past it and we talk about, Doug, the end of the season that mercifully came to an end between two teams sharing a city, playing in a basketball game that nobody cared about.
BTH backwards. Everything about that was wrong.
BHD. BHD. It's the letters. You know, a couple days ago, I don't care, buddy. End of the season, so we get to do what we want on this podcast now. Doug was really impressed with how he could spell. I consider myself to be adequate in that department, but I never said anything about abbreviations, so you can't really hold me to that. And get three letters.
That season ends with a whimper. Obviously, would have been probably nice to be able to beat the Knicks in this situation. They end up losing by 8 at home in a game where, I'll just throw it out there, Mikal Bridges checks himself in for 0 minutes to maintain a streak. I'm commenting it only because everyone commented on the beginning of it. Whatever. You stick around long enough, I think you can a little bit make the rules on that if you want to, but whatever. So it would have been not the worst thing in the world for the Nets to beat the Knicks, but in a season that kind of like nothing played out 100% as planned, it wasn't too surprising that they would weirdly tank this game, which would have been nice to win. And, kind of went the opposite direction at the games in the season. So nothing made sense. We're going to talk about words that we associate with the season. Mine might be, 8 words. I'm nothing if not verbose and not exactly succinct when it comes to, one word turns into 50, but overall the Nets season ended kind of with a question mark, which felt like the theme for the whole season, which was kind of a question mark about like sort of where they were living in this tanking, non-tanking culture versus non-culture realm, which we can never quite figure out.
I'm going to give you a great one here too, though, because just so everybody knows, 4th place finish, 26-56, 4th in the Atlantic Division. We all know divisions in the NBA and that they still exist, and that matters for the Brooklyn Nets. Not a bad. They were right behind top 3. Oh, what would have been a great season. You mentioned
so
there.
Close.
You mentioned there about like words we associated with it. I had asked over on social the other day, what would be the one word to sum up this season? And you got a lot of those standard things, right? Failure, lukewarm, absent, unpredictable. Somebody made a comparison of a word. I'll find out. Somebody gave a great one, which was over, ! But also one that associated with a migrating fish from saltwater to freshwater, which I thought made a lot of sense as well. But I'm curious what your word for the season would be. You can use multiple as in your verbose nature, but I have the word, and I think it sums it up perfectly. And it's like pretty easy to point to the 10 pole reasons why.
Yeah, I think mine would just be head scratcher. Like, I just didn't understand sort of what was going on the whole season. I think they made a couple things that made sense and then sort of instantly undid them with things that didn't seem to follow the same lines. And I'm all for a team sort of having a plan and having it go a little differently because some things were different than expected. Like the veterans were just a little too good, or Jordy was just much better coach. I still think there was many things that happened this season that just don't follow any sort of logical path to maximizing the opportunity that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only accentuated by doing all the things we kind of wanted them to do very late in the season and feeling like it was okay then, but not okay earlier. And that's the kind of thing that I'll just never really understand. Like losing this game against the Knicks and kind of sitting everyone out actually was the perfect exemplification of like everything that kind of never made sense about this team all year long and drove fans nuts, and drove fans probably nuts the ones that were rooting for them to win. So I just think, joking earlier, and we'll get to your word, my last thought is we joked earlier that like these moves by them were just a middle finger to both sets of fans at the end, like tankers and anti-tankers alike, because it undid both of the arguments. Like ending the season, really, it couldn't have gone any other way. So I'll just say head scratcher.
Ending the season couldn't have gone any other way. And that's why my word is expected. This is exactly as we all should have seen this going. Expected. Why? Because underneath the Sean Marks regime, it has always been not quite the thing that you wanted it to be. We all should have expected that Dorian Finney-Smith wasn't going to get traded in the offseason, that he would start the year with the team, and it would take all the way to get to a place where you finally trade him. We should have expected that after years of ineptitude in terms of a head coach, after letting go of Kenny Atkinson, who maybe was the guy, they, of course, find the right head coach at exactly the wrong time when you need to be tanking. Cam Johnson doesn't get traded. Should have expected it. Cam Thomas, this is a guy that's going into a year when it's critical for an offseason and a contract. Should have expected. We won't have any more clarity about whether or not the Nets love him, hate him, want to trade him or otherwise. And then even down the line into players like Noah Clowney. Yes, we saw growth and development from him, but it still feels like we're not entirely sure what he's going to be for the Brooklyn Nets going forward. So on so many different levels, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but for the entire time that we have covered this team on this podcast, it has always been this murky, muddled, not quite sure. Sometimes the verbiage they say publicly doesn't match up with the actions. And then by the end of the season, we always end up in the same spot going, I can't believe it. Nothing quite went the way we thought, whatever the bar was. And that's why it has to be expected.
Yeah, it's funny actually. It's a head scratcher because it was a head scratcher because it was expected or something like that. It was like they combine, they almost combine into a like, you know, if this then that sort of statement. And yeah, it's just totally right. Like, and you make a good point about since we started doing this podcast, we basically started podcasting between this network and we had a previous podcast, essentially the same thing, right around the days right before they signed Kyrie and KD. Like I think we started podcasting like a month or two before that happened, and ever since that time, and this team has been a tumultuous team since that point, right? Before that, actually, didn't have all these markings of it. Like they went to the, you know, when they went to the playoffs in that season with D'Lo and you know, Jared Dudley almost fights Ben Simmons in that first round matchup and whatever. Like, I don't know, that season was kind of like, that was over expectation, right? Yeah. That was okay. That team went beyond expectations. Since then, it's been under expectation almost across every narrative, like wins and losses, culture, right? Like plan, everything has been below expectations around that. And look, we've been as big apologists as Sean Marks stuff as anybody else through the years. I think probably like we've agreed with a lot of stuff that he's done. And I think we've like held it to the fire a little bit at times, but I think we've overly been probably more apologetic for him than against it, right? I think that's probably, at least for me, I think that's probably where we've landed. But at the same time, to finish the season like this and to have this season, it's just not surprising at all. Like we've been through this. You go and do a podcast about the Nets every 5 days a week for 5 years. And like, you're like, I'm not surprised. Like, I'm not surprised it went like this. It's a little bit of a head scratcher. It's a little bit of, you know, it's mostly expected, but they kind of just, they coalesce into this feeling of never really getting it. Look, if they spike a high lottery pick this year and they can sort of defy the odds, more power to them. I guess it'll be a win, and it won't have mattered. The whole season will hinge on that ping pong ball, basically, right? Like I think that everything will be wrapped up into where that ball lands. And to think that like they would do things by the book or by the expected book was folly to even think that from the beginning.
We have plans, obviously, coming up this week. We're going to talk about some of the comments from Sean Marks around a lot of different things, the offseason, superstars, trades, all that stuff. So we will do that. You want to be here for that episode. I have one follow-up comment on this when we talk about the word that sums up the season. Before we turn our attention over to some unexpected stat lines coming out of this year for key players, everything from points scored to minutes. We'll do that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. You got the basketball playoffs going, you got the hockey playoffs heating up. No better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks. It's the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy. All you're doing on Prize Picks, you're going more or less than at least 2-player projections, and that's it. You're in. Combine those players across sports, go basketball, hockey, baseball, so much more. For your chance to win up to 2,000x your cash. 2,000x. I was gonna say dollars, but it's 2,000 times your cash. You can go basketball. You can go roll through the NBA playoffs and just go any one of these guys. You know, more or less points, rebounds, blocks, steals, assists, all that stuff. Combine it with hockey. Maybe you think Connor McDavid's gonna get a goal. There's Austin Matthews, all these guys can dabble a little bit in each of the sports, chuck it in with some baseball. Maybe you want to go more or less home runs, strikeouts. It's all there for you over on Prize Picks. You're not wrangling with salaries. You just go more or less on the Prize Picks projections. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDON NBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. And when you're done with that, head on over to our friends at Wayfair. Spring's here. It means it's time for another home project this season. Maybe you're refreshing a room, tackling a big renovation. Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. You got the small updates taken care of, like stylish hardware, cabinet hardware, to major upgrades, maybe the new vanities, sink, or outdoor lighting. Get the big project going. You want to get over to Wayfair. It's got the quality products for every single budget. Hey, like you said, you're upgrading that kitchen, that bathroom, that living space. Wayfair has got you covered. And fast and free shipping makes it super easy. No hauling heavy items from the store. Love the way they get the G and the Mo at great prices. Shopping super seamless as well. Wayfair makes home improvements easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the end of the season, what it's been, what it hasn't been, and what maybe it will become. It's a beautiful thing. We'll also take a look at those play-in games, because there is a question to pose here, specifically in the Eastern Conference, about what would be a maybe surprisingly positive outcome to a year, and then a disastrous one for another team when we look at those play-in matchups. But the last note really quick on the word that summarizes the season, the Sean Marks and everything. We said this before, and I'll just reiterate it here. We're going to talk about Marks more later on. But when it's the same ownership group and the same GM, even though the coaches have changed and obviously the players have turned over a lot, I think if you swapped it out for any other version of it, if there had been different GMs rattling through here, there's not necessarily a certainty of, it would have been different. The results would have been different. But when it's the same captain at the helm, it makes it a lot harder, right? We said this before. It just makes it really brutal to get to an end of another season and go, what the heck was that? And when you feel like it's year over year with the same guy in charge and obviously same ownership group, it makes it a little bit funkier to think about. Anything on that, though, before we get into just kind of the stats summary of this season, which is pretty wide-ranging in terms of expectations versus outcome on an individual player level.
I think you make a good point about Marks. I mean, this is like still a referendum on him. And I think, someone's probably going to...
I'm doing an apologist by even saying that, but it feels like it is a reality, and sports is funky that way, right?
Yeah, and look, we just have like a long track. Most GMs don't get the track record to like do this many different things and kind of have it not go right. I like usually if it went this wrong in this many different ways for a GM, like they don't get this many bites at the GM apple. They're gone well before this. It's usually, sometimes you're gone well before this. The Nuggets just won the championship 2 years ago and fired their GM. I mean, like it can go a lot worse, right? Like with a lot better results. So, but I think the fact that Marks has been here the whole time is like sort of probably a head scratching moment for a lot of people. And my final thing about the tanking thing, and it's really, I guess it's, I don't know if you know if it's worth it to say it, but it's like, it's one of those things. I know people are like, all you talk about is the tanking. My last thing is like, I know what they would have gotten for like having more losses. It's like hard to know what they get for more wins, right? Like that's the one that's a little harder to scratch your head. So when you say like, there should have been a better plan around this with Sean Marks, I get that. I think that is a very fair criticism, even though we would agree that it's not in the nature of sports to kind of do this thing. And it sucks that the league works this way. I hate it, but you just can't point to like the tangible things that you get for the more wins. Should we rock some stats here?
I will, because now I can't get away from it. And I'll say too, it's like we say, where's the ping pong ball fall?
That's all that matters.
Attached to it. And on the May 12th, it's gonna be like, oh my God, it was third. It washes some of the salts away. Spikes first. We're gonna have a whole conversation about that. But I'll really quickly say the secondary part of that too. And this isn't a justification for Sean Marks. It's not an excuse. How that player performs wherever they land in the draft and the lottery odds is going to matter as much. The only problem is you're not going to know that on lottery night, and you're not going to know that on draft night. You're not going to know that for maybe a couple of seasons about a guy maybe they draft 7th that ends up working out for the organization. It's not an excuse, doesn't make it right. You want the better odds, but that's the funky thing about sports.
It's not going to matter though. It won't matter because if it's 7th or 8th,
the reality of what it is, right? Yeah. Guys succeed, guys fail. It won't be, by the way, it won't be vindication if the 7th pick ends up working out for Brooklyn, it'll be a saving grace when we reflect back on mistakes made by Sean Marks. That being the case.
All right. I got you.
So
but it is funny. It's all going to hinge on that moment, which is another very silly thing about sort of the way the system works. Okay. Let's hit some stats here. So I'm going to do a couple with Adam that he was not sure about, or sorry, that he was not sure about, that I did not prep him ahead of time on this one. I did prep him ahead of time on this one. So he has the answer, but I want to go at this because I want to ask everyone, do not look, Nets fans out there. Think to yourself, who played the most minutes on the Nets this year? We'll go just as I vamp here for 1 second. Just think to yourself, you had a guess who played the most minutes when it was over. Adam, tell everyone who your first guess was. And I'll say who my first guess would have been.
Yeah, first guess, I went with Cam Johnson, probably, gave up on the fact that he got shut down towards the end of the season. Yeah.
Yeah, and then your second and my first was Keon Johnson. I was like, okay, Keon. I just knew he started a ton of games. I was like, he started a ton of games. He kind of played all through even the tanking stuff, and so Cam Johnson was fourth. Keon Johnson was second. Nick Claxton third. Jalen Wilson was first, and I could not believe this. I was like, as someone who watched, like, I will say I did not watch the last game of the year. Birthday party got rescheduled, so they weren't into putting the game on the screen. But so
Selfish.
Basically every other game. I would have guessed like 3 or 4 other players before I got to him for sure. I would have guessed anyone that started, like Zaire Williams would have been a guess beforehand. I probably would have guessed Claxton before him. I think I might have even guessed like Tyrese Martin before him. It was like, probably not. Probably would have guessed Jalen Wilson.
But just guys that spike in your mind of like, you talked about him a lot because they were getting a lot of run right over the course of the season.
Yeah, I just thought that was a wild number. So, not a lot of great other takeaways. The list goes: Jalen Wilson was 1, Keon 2nd, Nick Claxton 3rd, Cam Johnson 4th, Zaire Williams 5th. And then the only other guys that played over 1,000 minutes were Tyrese Martin 6th, and then Noah Clowney at 7th, and everyone else was under 1,000 minutes. I just thought it was a really interesting sort of look. I think you probably know this. Who do you think led the team in net rating differential on the positive side this year of players that played real minutes? We'll say I'll just say Killian Hayes somehow is number 1 here, so I'm just not going to count him. Of players that played real minutes, who do you think led the team in a net rating point differential on the plus side?
It's either D'Lo or Day'Ron Sharpe.
It was Day'Ron Sharpe. He was, as a guy who finished the season, he was plus 12.4 on the season. The other 2 guys that led the team, Dorian Finney-Smith was 13.1, so he was technically the highest. And then Schroeder was second, or he was third at 11.5. I think you probably already know the answer to this. Who was last in point differential this year?
Claxton, baby.
Yeah, by an absolute country mile. Minus 13.7. Really. Oh, sorry. That Tyson Etienne was minus 13.7, minus 9.9. The next closest player in net rating was in negatives was Noah Clowney at minus 7, then Keon Johnson at minus 6.1. I mean, it's interesting about how there was a massive swing in this number. I mean, this number is awful. And we could do a whole episode on him, but we kind of already did. He had a horrible between this and the head-scratching technical fouls. We got one in the last game of the year. It was a horrible season for him. I don't think there's any other way to paint it.
Nope. And it's almost, it shouldn't be shocking. Actually, in some ways, in a season where they didn't do expectations, whatever, one of the guys didn't get a ton of run in Day'Ron Sharpe, best plus-minus differential, guy who had the worst plus-minus, as you might expect on a team like this. But Nicholas Claxton, what an absolute terrible year for him. And not in an insignificant way in terms of building the core going forward, right? And wanting to feel like you have certain guys cemented in certain roles. It did feel like a big side step back for him, just in terms of what he is, right? We know he's not the perfect type of player to have at the 5, the shot, all those things. But in the end, I don't think we would have come into this year fast forwarding and saying, Nicholas Claxton's going to be in real murky waters. We knew the contract was big. We knew the Nets could afford to pay him. But this even underperformed a lower set of expectations relative to what was going to happen over the course of the season. Coming up here in a second, by the way, I do want to hit there's a couple of funny things. Getting back to the Jalen Wilson and having the most minutes played here. We'll also tap into the playing games and any other surprising numbers that jumped out at us here to close out the season. We'll do that here in just one moment.
Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. NBA playoffs are almost here. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel, place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Like FanDuel makes things so easy. You get your favorite team, you get diving into those player props. I'll tell you right now, start diving into the player props now. Come up for air tomorrow when we do our next FanDuel read. You still won't be all the way through it. 3-pointer, steals, assists. FanDuel slice and dice it every different way. After the game tips off, you get on that live betting action as well, all through the NBA playoffs. Don't miss out. Head on over to FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets today. FanDuel.com.
All right, so as we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, also tying a pretty little bow on the Brooklyn Nets season. We talk about some stats that tracked and ones that didn't make a lot of sense. I will just quickly say here before you have one more that you're going to ask me, it's also funny that from a average minutes per game standpoint, do you know who led the team? I bet you must have, having looked over these numbers.
Who led the team in average minutes per game?
That's correct.
I mean, was that, I would have guessed Keon Johnson for that too, right? Like,
well, and that's the fun thing about this. No, because it was actually Dennis Schroeder averaging 33.6 minutes per game in his 23 games played. All 23 started for Brooklyn. Next up was Cam Johnson. He played a ton, 31.6. Cam Thomas, in just his 25 games, 23 starts, played over 31 minutes per night. And the reason why I bring it up is because, and we can't count the 27 minutes per night for Killian Hayes, 6 games, 5 starts. But Jalen Wilson was 8th on the team in average minutes per game at 25.7. It's the 79 games that he played in that got him to the most minutes on the season. He only started 22. So it jumps out to me because those top guys like Cam Johnson only played in 57, started all 50 games. So it's obviously how you build up your big minute reps here. But Jalen Wilson just played a ton, only missed 3 games the entire season, or did not play in, I should say. Injuries aside. Making
I find out. And look, with a team like this, if you're just healthy all the games, I mean, like that's all it kind of takes, like be healthy for 79 of the games.
12th for Keon Johnson at 24.4. And there's a lot of guys clumped together there, but second in total minutes, 12th in terms of average minutes per game. So he did the long run there as well. What was your last mystery question?
I got one. This is an interesting one. Who led the team in 3-point percentage more than 50 attempts? So you had to have more than 50 attempts for 3-pointers. And who led the team in 3-point percentage?
Okay, well, it can't be Cam Johnson because that wouldn't be worth asking.
Third.
Would it be a fun one? I'll do a fun one.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It's for sure a fun
Tariq
one.
Whitehead.
I'd be shocked. What's that?
Tariq Whitehead.
44.6 44.6% from 3, 33 for 74. Yeah, I should get to more than 70 attempts. Yeah, 44.6 from 3 when it was all said and done. DFS was second at 43.5, Cam at 39%. Shake Milton somehow sneaks in there by my own made up stat at 39%. So I don't know, Tariq, that's a funny one to end the season on. Like he led the team. But if you slice it by 70 attempts, which is kind of nothing, but not really, I don't know, like whatever. Played 20 games, played 250 minutes shot almost 45% from 3. We'll take it. What, you want to know the wild thing? Oh my gosh. Actually, ready for this one? Oh, this is even better. Who do you think was dead last in 2-point percentage on the team?
Oh, Jesus God. Well, I won't say Ben Simmons, but also, I mean, Nicholas Claxton probably, because he had a horrible year around the basket. Like he had a horrible season at finishing at the rim.
Nick Claxton was second on the team overall.
Really? The entire team.
You can't ever choose center. You can't bad by you. You can't choose center.
I know, but you know how bad he was relative to year over year?
I mean, he's bad. He's bad relative to other centers, but like he's not bad relative to other players. No, Tariq Whitehead was last by forever in 2-point percentage. So he's number one in 3-point percentage at 45%, 27% from 2. He took 74 3-pointers and he took 22 2-pointers. That is wild.
Another one of those healthy diets, like Noah Clowney. We're gonna have you shoot 3s. Anything else?
I mean, that's like some kind of like analytics nightmare. Like I don't even know what to make of that. So anyway, my guess is he's considerably better from 2 than he looks on paper, and he's probably a little bit worse from 3. I mean, that's tweet worthy. We'll be sending that one out as like the weirdest stat that I've seen for the team. And that's a couple of little things. Well, I won't try to quiz you on this one because I just don't think it's like you'll never be able to guess it. I don't think, but or it's not worth trying to wade through all the names. And that's only a 2 5-man lineups this whole season that went over a combined 100 minutes together. The top lineup was what they basically started the season with, which was this opening night starting lineup: Schroeder, Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, DFS, and Claxton. That team played that 5-man lineup played 106 minutes and was a big part of the responsible reason about why they had more wins, because that 5-man group was plus 29 on the season.
There you go.
So that 5-man group just like wasn't tank worthy. Like they were just simply too good to tank.
Guess what? A bunch of veterans, right?
And
like
they started and they started off well, and that was kind of it. Like that was they banked some wins early, and they weren't able to ever kind of get back after those wins when they were like essentially 500 to start the season. The second most
lineup, Sean Mark's cap for talent acquisition on that front.
Yeah, well then he acquires D'Lo back, and that was the second lineup that over 100 minutes. D'Lo, Zaire, Keon Johnson, Cam Johnson, and Nick Claxton. That group played 104 minutes. That was minus 52 on the season. So an 81 point swing, an 81 point plus minus swing between the lineup that they had at the beginning of the year and the one they essentially traded for once they traded away DFS and Schroeder. And that lineup was perfectly tank worthy over the rest of it. It just, the first group just did a little too well to start the season. So those are the two most 5-man lineups that they played.
That's impressive, certainly on a number of levels, including the fact that it maybe broke the season in several different points along the way. To close things out, and we'll have more conversation. I mentioned Sean Marks and his quotes about it. We're also gonna go into the finer detail on all the players, right? Who performed well, who set themselves up for success next season, all that good stuff, and then obviously barreling towards the lottery odds next month. But Tuesday night, the play-in tournament will kick off for the NBA ahead of the playoffs. And we know that for the most part, once you get to the playoffs, first rounds are almost always chalk, and it's kind of weird and a bummer, and 4-0, series for a lot of these teams. But I looked at this matchup with the Atlanta Hawks and the Orlando Magic, and I'm not saying it's going to be a good game, a bad game, or anything, but the immediate thing I thought was, wow, for where you started the year for expectations, and maybe Atlanta dismantling the thing entirely, and they did make some trades along the way, but Trae Young is still there. And Orlando, who had a ton of injuries, but were supposed to take that next step that Detroit seemingly leapfrogged them and took themselves. If Orlando loses the play-in game to the Atlanta Hawks, that'll be a pretty ugly mark for them in terms of stepping stone seasons. And it just jumped out to me in terms of these play-in games, and typically doesn't matter, but there could be a bit of a referendum on that team, that roster, and what they do this offseason after having a very underperforming year.
Well, yeah, I mean, they can lose and then win the next one. I mean, like,
yes, they can still get. Well, by the way, it'd be even worse if they lose both times and don't make it in.
Yeah, I think they're like probably favorites to like get in at this point, like to probably be able to get. Although the Heat might not be a tough out. So yeah, I think there are ways you could definitely see it happening. Feisty or Bulls have been just feisty enough. Like I think it does shake out to be interesting. And I'm with you. I think that the way they started this season for them to, now they had some injuries like with Suggs, but for them to like be basically for the Pistons to bank it and for the Magic to fall out of that is pretty. It's an interesting case. And by the way, how many more times the anti-tanking crowd that's just brought up the Pistons forever? I don't know. Cade, Duran, Ivy coming back next year, Osser, like that team looks okay. They had to go through the draft for a couple years, but it turns out when you pick first and then fourth and grab a couple other picks along the way, fast forward 3 years, and you got a pretty nice young core with a superstar in Cade, which he for sure is. And all of a sudden,
it really came on this year, right? Like you need that.
By the way, like a few years in, and kind of had it all come together and played for sure like a number one pick. Like that's the case for kind of riding it out for a few years.
And by the way, not as a number one overall pick in his draft class, but not considered the way that we talk about Cooper Flagg, the way we talk about this draft class, right?
He was for sure the number one guy. Like he was for sure. That draft, he was. Yeah. He was not a Cooper Flagg territory. He was chalk number one pick though. Cause I remember when they spiked that, watching Koo's reaction from Locked On Pistons, like they knew who they were getting, right? It was like, they're getting Cade. And you fast forward a few years and turns out the drafted number one ends up like being pretty good for your organization.
And I'll just quickly say, so you can go ahead and enjoy these games, obviously, because you mentioned Chicago and Miami, like whatever you think about it, but it's a good year for Chicago to maybe get some young guys playing well. They did it wrong, but whatever. Miami, the flip side of the West bracket. I mean, obviously Golden State gets 2 bites of the apple to make it in. Memphis fired their coach. The Kings blew it all up in a hilarious, only kind of Sacramento Kings, probably West Coast, East Coast cousins with the Brooklyn Nets in a lot of ways. But then Dallas, rumored to maybe be the landing spot for one Kevin Durant to reunite with Kyrie Irving this summer via trade. They still end up in the play-in game, which after all of it, it's still a disaster. But if they somehow won that game, it would just, there's been some really funny, funky narratives that have played out over the course of this NBA season. So there are some interesting things here, at least from a narrative standpoint, even in the play-in tournament for the NBA.
Oh, the content. I mean, if Dallas made the playoffs, I forget it. Like, forget it. It'd be worst trade in NBA sports history. And then they're going to, I don't know, back their way into the playoffs. What a mess. Hey, should be a fun playoff. Should be fun play-in. We'll go through a few of these games when we're back in, tomorrow. In the meantime, make sure that you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iTunes. Go give a follow on YouTube as well. Leave a comment. We'll do the Fan Take Fridays all the way through the offseason.
If you don't ride in the rain, you don't ride. And that is Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Oh, R.I.P. One of the all-time great, literally all-time great poets.
Bikes or something? Yeah, but like, what is that? I mean, it sounds more like a quote about motorcycles, which I don't think.
It's just like talk about the outdoors a lot. It's kind of enough. I mean, like, whatever, man. We get it. The outdoors are great.
Oh my God, with the rain, the things, and the elements, fantastic. Jeez,
sounds great. Leaves the grass. That sounds great. Okay, is that him? I think so. All right, one of the all-time great poets. He'll be missed. We'll be talking about more about tomorrow.
No.
I screwed up. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
And the plane, basketball, yeah.